Okay, thanks again for joining us. So look, we've got some responses in the chat. We got a few more people coming in. Hey, Eric, Southwest Florida, remodeling company. So you probably see a lot of hurricane destruction, I'm guessing. And that's a lot of what Harvard's report just came out with. And I'm sure that Rich can speak to that too, is a lot of the projects that we're seeing is people who want age in place and then also remodeling to maintain homes that have been damaged or protect homes that have not yet been damaged, but want to avoid that and make sure that you stay up with insurance. So thank you all for joining. My name is Jennifer Castenson. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations at Build Exact, and very, very excited and honored to have some great guests with us today. We have Rich Bensaka with Pro Builder, and we have Russ Stevens with the Association of Professional Builders. So thank you guys both for joining us. I'm not going to go into lengthy introductions. I know we can kind of cover a lot of what you guys do when we start responding. And to kick us off in a fun, maybe like high energy way, we're going to do some fast moving softball pitches. So short answers, and we'll just get the energy flowing a little bit. Russ, starting with you. Russ, what is your favorite construction podcast?
Nice, easy one to start with. I like it. Thanks, Jennifer. That's got to be Professional Builders Secrets, of course. That's the podcast hosted by our own Will Blunt. So, yeah, tune into that every week. Listen to builders, industry experts, and even our own coaches. So, yeah, that's the one I love the most.
Yeah, that is good. Will does a really great job with that. And we've been honored to be on that podcast before. So next is you, Rich. Rich, what technology will have the biggest impact on the industry this year?
Well, if you want a quick answer, I think it's going to be the digitization or continuing digitization of home buying process. So really builders embracing the consumer demand for more online features, more ability to see as much of the house as possible and hit the buy now button. I think that's going to be the most impactful technology that evolves this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to that, and we can unpack that a little bit more when we get further in the conversation. But I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of people that don't even know like how to define digitization for their own organization. And then you get into AI and you get into, I was talking to the chief technology officer at Dell last week, and he's like, I don't blame you for being lost because I'm lost and I look at it every single day. So there's so much to it, and it's almost mind numbing. And if you feel like there's a good starting point for our listeners, that would be fun to talk about as well. So I'd like both of you.
We've got some data behind that. So go ahead. No, I'm sorry. We put out a survey last year with a software company, Hierarch, where we were asking builders. One of the questions we had was, are you, given the digitization of the home buying process, are you considering eliminating or reducing the number of built model homes that you have for people to walk through? And 62% of them said yes. And a certain number of those have actually eliminated model homes and gone completely digital. So I think that there's like you said, it's a complex issue, but there's a lot of money involved in building a model home or model home park that can be used elsewhere and better if you digitize properly.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that would have implications on your purchasing, on supply chain, and just like it is a pretty broad topic, and it could help with efficiencies and closing sales faster. So that's a big pivot point for a lot of people. So starting with you, Rich, another question. What are you most optimistic about in 2025?
Well, I think just the fact that this industry is really resilient has always proven to be resilient. I think that, there's a lot of headwinds in the industry and certainly some economic uncertainty now and really has been since COVID. But I think that just the fact that this industry proves to be resilient and will bounce back and weather whatever storms are thrown at them. It's going to be tough, but they always do.
Yeah, it's kind of a have to, when you have to, you find a way, right? Russ, how about you? What are you most optimistic about?
Look, the thing I'm most optimistic about and excited about as well is that seeing the better builders rise to the top and outperforming the rest of the field. I think in the past years it's been a bit harder for builders to, or the best builders to actually stand out. But now it's becoming very clear who the best operators are, the most systemized, slickest operators. And I think those guys are seeing the rewards of being at the top of their game. And that's something, we're just seeing more and more, these guys rising to the top, but also standing out as well. So that's what I'm pretty excited about, especially with AI coming into a system.
Yeah, so what do you think? Why does that excite you? Why do you does that mean that it's a success for APB because they outgrow what what you've helped them scale, or is it because they are able to teach other people in the industry? What is it that excites you about that?
Because it's good for the industry. This industry doesn't have the best reputation out there, or maybe it's just a perceived reputation, but it's suffered over the years. It kind of appears to be inefficient, and I think that's what we're seeing change. So as the better operators rise to the top, we're seeing respect for builders increase because, you've only got to go online. You see, residential builders don't get a lot of respect from the general public, but we're seeing that change. We'd like to see builders put right up there with engineers, because that's what they are. They're engineers. These are very talented people that are both creative and analytical. They've got to be using both sides of their brain, and they don't get the recognition they deserve for what they do and create. So that's what I think is good for the industry as we become more systemized, more organized, more streamlined, and most of all, more professional. That is changing the perception from the general public about builders as well.
Yeah, I love that. That is so true. A builder has to be everything to everyone all at once. And it's such a complex role because they have to be a humble servant to the homeowner. They have to work with their subcontractors. They have to use their actual expertise in the skills and the trades that they know. They have to be project managers. They have to be and it all happens at once, like I said, and it is so complex. So
they have to combine the traits and the skills of an architect stroke building designer who are very creative and use the right hand side of their brain. They've got to combine that with the numbers and the analytics of an accountant using the left hand side of their brain. So they've got to have a full stack to run a successful building company, whereas anyone with half a brain can be an architect or an accountant, can't they? But to be a builder, you've really got to have the full stack.
Yeah, I don't know about that last thing. So thank you guys for joining us, and the chat is open. I know Russ just made a comment that I'm curious as to if you guys feel like the respect in the industry is elevating. Tell us about what you're seeing and feeling and what you're experiencing out there. But anytime you want, just put a question or a comment in the chat. I'll be watching it. Back to you, Rich. We talked about opportunities. What is the biggest opportunity? But what is the biggest challenge right now in the industry?
Well, I think, in both anecdotally and some of the research we're conducting right now, I think we're seeing that, the uncertainty of the economy is really a challenge right now. Builders just don't know what's really going to come. And we've been very careful about reporting what is being speculated in terms of what will happen with, tariff policies, immigration policies, things that affect builders directly in terms of costs and available labor, which is already strained. And I think that, I think uncertainty both in the markets and in this particular sector, is not good for it. It's just that builders don't know what to do. Companies don't know what to do. Are they going to ramp up production? Are they going to hold, are they going to hold pat? Are they going to charge more? Are they going to eat the tariff cost? I think, and when they come on and off, it's really difficult for this industry to really know what to do and what really the impact is of that. So, there's always headwinds. Every survey that we do of our readers, they come back with, higher labor costs, higher materials costs. Um, interest rates still are a little stubborn. Those are kind of perennial. But right now, and if you look back even to 2022, 23, the economy and the uncertainty in the economy is the number one, and everything else kind of falls away until that gets taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And I think that it's so volatile right now that it's hard to think day to day and put together a strategic plan that would make you feel pretty comfortable. And as a small business owner, then you have to think of so many different elements, and that's hard to consider when the dynamics are so, like I said,
Well, and you're
volatile.
so beholden to other parts. You're beholden to a supply chain industry. You're beholden to a or supply chain infrastructure. You're beholden to labor for the most part, at least among production builders, who are struggling to find labor, and land use issues and land use policies and regulations. So I think that it's already complex, as Russ alluded to, and I completely agree. But it's even more complex when you really don't know where the wind's going to come from,
Yeah.
and how hard it's blowing. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that too, depending on what your business is, you're going to have different inputs will impact you in different ways. So I know Eric said he's in Florida, and so he's probably looking at different risks to his business, whereas somebody in the northern US would be looking at a little bit different. So yeah, it's geographically different, and then also based on the whims of the administration and some other factors too. So
Yeah.
so challenges to you, Russ. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from your builders?
Yeah, look, I'd certainly start by echoing everything that Rich just said there. I mean, the uncertainty at the moment, is going to be incredibly challenging for builders. But just building on that, I'd also add it's the pace of change I see as one of the biggest challenges for builders in the coming year, but in the next 2 or 3 years as well, with AI literally transforming the landscape for all businesses, not just builders, but every single industry is going to be affected. It's going to affect calling, chat, all communication. We're going to see a lot more of AI agents as the year progresses, and that is going to cause massive upheaval for companies, as certainly I can see it starting with replacing offshore staff, just having automated agents replace the admin that offshore staff are doing. But after that, it will be coming for more regular jobs as well. And I think the challenge here is keeping up with technology, but without leading the way. Because sometimes it's nice to be seen to be on the cutting edge, but I think this is moving so fast, I think you're better off just holding back a little bit. You want to be adopting proven systems and strategies that are working as AI comes in, but you don't want to be right on the front. You don't want to be a pioneer, because you can spend a lot of money developing stuff that comes out literally a few months later. And that's something we've certainly seen over the last 12 months. So, you want to be at the forefront, but you don't want to be leading the way.
Yeah, and I just want you to tag on to that, Rich, because I think that's a really, really good point, is just the pace of change, and how are builders responding to that? How are they able to respond to that?
Yeah, I think generally, and again, talking probably more so about production builders, not the ones at the large scale, but the middle scale guys that are doing 50 to 500 units a year, maybe 50 to 300 units a year. It's the pace of change depends on how much change they're required to make to stay competitive. And in some markets, in some builders, they're fine. They may not be making as much as they could, or they may not be selling as much as they could, but they're comfortable, and they're not necessarily feeling they got enough challenges. They're not necessarily feeling inspired or driven to embrace technologies, and that's across the board, not just AI, but different ways to produce housing, different construction methods, different ways to operate, integrating their software programs if they have any. I think that So and notoriously, and Russ knows this, you know this too, Jennifer, is that this is a risk averse industry. There's a bell curve like any other industry where you've got kind of early adopters and people that are looking at new technologies and spending the money and the time and the effort and commitment to integrate it. But even then, to Russ's point, it's not necessarily pioneering. It's every builder, I think, wants to see either another industry or certainly other builders succeed at a certain technology and a certain method of integrating technology before they follow. And that bell curve, then comes into play where you've got, very, very, the rate of adoption becomes very slow. And then there's always the folks at the end that just refuse to change. And whether they're going to be dinosaurs and go away, or whether they're going to just kind of survive in their market and be fine, that's kind of up to them. But I think that depends on your business model, depends on your business sophistication, and your understanding of the world, not just your segment. That will drive whether you're willing and able to invest time and commitment and money into new ideas.
Yeah, so I want to get into the Sorcery report because I think that, we'll talk about how, Russ, you've seen some results from that report and data to support some of the things that we're talking about. But I think, Rich, what you made me think about is that I know we were already starting our conversation about all the different inputs that a builder has. And if it's kind of like the Matter platform for a smart home technology. The Matter platform just made it really smart so everything can integrate. But like when a builder has to choose something, then they have to think about how it works with all the dynamics of their business, right? So what is the financial platform that they're using, and who is their accountant? What is their accountant using? And all of these different factors, who do they buy from? What lumberyard? Does that lumberyard have a system that they can tie into? And all of that technology, they have to be smart about and strategic about doing that. I mean, I've talked to builders that choose a platform and they're like, we couldn't use it for very long because it doesn't integrate with anybody we're working with. And so that becomes a big factor in that pace of change. Even if somebody wants to adopt technology, then they might have to like pull back the reins a little bit because their whole network or their whole ecosystem isn't ready yet. So just an interesting dynamic. Russ, please tell us about the Sorcery report and what you guys found and where it's available.
Sure. So the State of the Residential Construction Industry report is something that we've been producing for the last 5 years now. And at the back end of last year, we had over 2,200 residential home builders, or I should say owners and directors of residential home building companies, answering around about 120 questions. And these questions covered their marketing, their advertising, their sales, their financials, operations, all aspects of operating a residential building company. And the data came in from owners of building companies in the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So it gives us a lot of in-depth information about how the industry is actually performing, so with some real hard data that we're able to then cross-reference different questions to do some real deep analysis, and we compile it into an annual report that we make available to the industry free of charge. We do provide a hard copy as well, but we put out the PDF free of charge. And actually I've got a copy here. I mean, just to give you an idea, this is that's what it looks like. So it's a very, very comprehensive industry report that we put together that enables builders to benchmark their building companies against other building companies in the same sector and in the same country.
Yeah, I love it. It's really thoughtful and put together well. So one of the things that was in one of the results in the Sorcery report was about builders that lived through the pandemic, and they're probably just going, oh, thank goodness the supply chain is normalizing. We don't have to deal with anything anymore. And then along come the tariffs. So what do you think about that? And like, how do you think that might impact the the results that you just published?
Look, it's very hard to say because it's such a fluid situation, isn't it? It seems to be changing daily, and what, it's just gone 6 o'clock in the morning here, so you've probably had more changes in the US kind of overnight that I don't even know about. But I'm trying to keep up. But I mean, I don't have to tell you guys. I mean, you know better than me that Trump's negotiating style is to come out, hit hard, and then negotiate back from that position. And I think that's exactly what we've seen with these tariffs. You know, it's come out with some very scary stuff that has spooked the markets, and then retracted from that. But who knows what's happened in the last 8 hours while I've been asleep.
Yeah. No, I think maybe more so is like, what advice would you give builders to be able to adjust their businesses properly and be able to manage under these kind of market dynamics and the different pressures that they're insinuating on them?
Well, I think it's more important than ever. I mean, you've got to be all across this anyway as a builder, because you're dealing with high revenue and low margins. And when you get that combination, you've got to be all across your financials. You've got to be understanding every dollar that goes into a project. And that is why you've got to be using dedicated software platforms, obviously like BuildExact, so that you can not only budget correctly, but you can track those overruns and underruns and get your estimates even better going forward. But obviously this is where it's good to have these cost escalation clauses built into the contracts as a fail-safe, because no builder ever wants to use those, because obviously that can lead to a challenging experience with the consumers. But you've got to protect your bottom line at all costs, and like we saw with COVID, without these protection measures in your contract, you can get caught out, and it wiped out a lot of building companies, unfortunately. So you don't want to get caught out like that again. I've seen the NAHB estimated that the tariffs are going to cause, the result of the tariffs is going to be about $9,000 extra on a typical home. Now, that really is not the end of the world for consumers, to be honest, because they're probably more affected by interest rates, wages, and in particular the loan to income ratio as well, which is going to affect their borrowing capacity. So that's probably going to be even more significant than the tariffs. But what these tariffs are doing are freaking out the markets. So when it freaks out the stock market, that impacts the property market. So that can make it tough for builders as well. So there's two components here. You've got to be all across your marketing so that you are generating surplus demand at all times, even in good times, so that you can build out your construction funnel in advance. So we coach builders to actually book out their construction slots between 12 and 24 months in advance. So those guys are not going to be impacted by short-term macro situations like these tariffs, for instance. But then on the flip side, you've got to be understanding how this is affecting your pricing. So as soon as you get those contracts locked in, you've got to be getting the orders out so that they are locked in. Now, we did see during COVID that suppliers and even subcontractors were not honouring orders that were placed. But in normal times, they do. So as long as those increases aren't too high, then the prices will get locked in. But again, there's you've got to be looking at this in advance. You can't be reactive. You can't be sitting back and waiting to see what happens. You've got to be looking at the future and thinking, what can we do to mitigate the risk?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And the cost escalation is, like you said, not ideal, but it's a great protection measure. So, Rich, I know you guys did Endeavor and Pro Builder and Custom Builder. You guys did some research as well. Can you share some of the research that you did, where we can find it, and then the most impactful findings from it?
Sure. Yeah, we try to do as much research as we can, and most of it is partnered with others, including Russ's group. We support getting people to take that survey, and then we promote it across our channels as well. But also we do a business technology report. We do a design and architecture trends report with other folks, and we tack on to surveys by by the Home Innovation Research Labs and NEHB and others. But we also do exclusive research. One is our annual forecast survey, which asks builders, kind of what they forecast or predict in the coming year. And then we also do our top 200, which was called Housing Giants survey, which is a fairly intensive survey looking at the largest builders by revenue in the country. And we ask similar questions of those, a different audience. Obviously, the forecast survey is a much more general audience. That's all of our audience of builders. The top 200 are literally the top 200, 250 builders in the country by revenue. And so that's at the top end for sure, a different business model than say the lowest end of our general readership, which are custom builders. But I think that, some things that we've done recently and even kind of ongoing, 64 of our top 200 or so builders last year built about 26,000 built for rent homes, built for rent housing units. And I think that that's going to continue to grow. I expect as we look at the data for this year, we're going to see maybe a 5 or 10,000 more units, maybe more than that, come through on those from those top 200 builders. And I think that's just a continuing trend to combat somewhat the attainable or affordable housing crisis that we have, and allowing people to get into secure housing that's in a community typically. Now more of the built to rent communities rather than scattered lot built to rent you're seeing are infill built to rent, maybe smaller scale, but is again a community. So really trying to kind of build that up as a legitimate alternative for people who can't afford to buy, run into headwinds with down payments or mortgage qualifying, and can get into a really nice new home that they can afford at a rental level. So I expect that to be something that continues, and something that we're tracking. I think that one thing that is surprising to me, although, well, it's surprising only because the reporting from other groups is so different. In our top 200 survey, we asked builders to provide us with different cost, what it costs them to do different things as a percentage of sales. So for instance, what percentage of sales go to land purchasing? What percentage of sales go to labor materials? What percentage of sales goes to advertising marketing? One of the questions that we ask are, what percentage goes to development permits and fees? Regulatory costs. The average among the 200 builders or 220 builders that reported last year was 2%. They're saying of their sales, of an average house price, 2% went to regulatory fees and permitting fees. That's a stark difference from the 23% that other groups are saying is the impact of regulatory costs on the cost of a home, the price of a home. So I'm interested in that disconnect. I want to see kind of really where it lands. If it really is only 2%, then you can see why it's hard to get traction among builders and even among municipalities to say, you need to reform your regulatory costs because they're really impacting housing affordability. But if it's only 2%, it really isn't. There's other costs, certainly hard costs, production costs, and inefficiencies within production costs, which are in the 20 to 30% range. And certainly land development, land purchasing is in that 20 to 30% range, where, that's where we need to be looking to really knock down the cost of housing and hopefully then the price of housing. So that's an important metric I'm watching. And then from our forecast survey, it was really interesting. And again, this is all pre-Trump administration and the activity that's happened in the last 3 or 4 months. But 81% of the builders who responded to that survey said that they expected both their number of homes and the revenue from those homes to increase in 2025. They've been really cautious the last 2 years, 23, 24. But for 25, they were much, much more aggressive and much, much more positive. And I'd be curious to ask them again now, like, are you that optimistic? I think some are, and again, I think it's market specific. I mean, this is a local business, so some markets are fairly healthy. Certainly tertiary markets. We could talk about that a little bit later, but I think that it's just interesting to me that they were so optimistic going into 25, and I think we all know why. And then now I think or I don't know, but I suspect that they're a little more cautious now, and for all the things that we've talked about up to this point. So those are kind of the key points of some of the research we've done, but there's so many others, I'm a data geek. I love going after the kind of the quantitative, and then backing up with some of the qualitative, anecdotal feedback that we get from our builders when we talk to them about these issues.
Same. And so my next question was where the sentiment is, but you just went through that. And I think that they'd have to, be hedging against their previous sentiment because of where consumers are now too. And I mean, I think there's one thing is that the media definitely can change how consumers feel and what they spend. And so I think that consumers are definitely feeling pressure to be a little bit more protective of their money and not putting a lot of investment in housing at the moment.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. I think obviously, whether you look at grocery prices or gas prices or energy costs or whatever it is that, that are kind of, on a monthly basis going up, I would say that I think consumers have become a little bit more resilient to that, only because wages have started to catch up a little bit, and they went through it in 22, 23, where inflation rose, 20% in basically the span of 15, 18 months.
Yeah.
And so now that inflation's more regular, now it's down to 2 or 3%, where the Fed wants it to be overall. Not in housing; it's still around 4 or 5, 6%. But they're I think they're used to it, and it's not a great. I think they're kind of used to it. I think they're like, okay, this is what things cost, and yeah, they continue to go up, but it's much more moderate. I think everybody who doesn't own a home or is in good housing or safe housing would like to be, and I think that we have a housing affordability issue in this country that needs to be addressed, and it's a very complex issue. I would also say that my survey is one gauge of sentiment, and certainly we don't track it more than once a year, really. But NHB does, and I think their housing market index with Wells Fargo, where it goes from 0 to 150 is basically a neutral market where builders are feeling not totally optimistic, but also not pessimistic. And at the end of March, it had dropped 4 points to 39. So it had been as high as 80, 81, around the 2022, 23 year. And now it's back down below 50, well below 50 to 39 in terms of sentiment and confidence in the market, in terms of sales traffic and sales conversions and actual sales. So I think that's an important metric to look at as well, because that's a monthly metric that they track.
Those are big swings too. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Rich. Russ, so a lot of your report had to do with technology, and there was a pretty big increase in the use of takeoff software. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, look, it was massive, wasn't it? Last year, I think across the board, we're seeing the adoption of technology increase year on year since we've been doing this report, since we started it 5 years ago. But like you say, takeoff software, that was one that really stood out. I think it was something like 57%. A year ago, and then the back end of last year, up to 78% of builders now using dedicated takeoff software. And I think it, apart from the incremental increase in more builders using tech, I think it's also come from cost pressures from rising material prices, which means there's less room for error. So builders know that they've got to get this accurate. Yeah, they've got to get their estimates more accurate. And we all know the stats on the amount of spreadsheets that contain errors. So a spreadsheet is probably the last thing that you want to be using for your estimates.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so I think there are, at BuildExact, we have a lot of contractors that we start using BuildExact that are transferring from using spreadsheets. So why are some contractors still using spreadsheets? And then when people use software, how do they quantify the benefits? Like, how are they looking at, this is going to pay off for me and my business?
Yeah, look, I think it's habit and familiarity. Builders are so busy because they have so much to do, so much to comply with. And when you've got to learn something new or change the way you're doing the things, that just builds up a barrier in the mind. So I think, yeah, it's a bit of habit and being comfortable using something rather than changing. There's a perceived simplicity about spreadsheets as well, because there's no learning curve of having to take on something new. Some builders might have a bit of sensitivity to cost. They might have a bit of a false economy mindset, where they think they can save a few dollars by using a spreadsheet. We know that's a false economy, because it's going to take more time. The accuracy is going to cost you money. So it really is a false economy. Can be a bit of a lack of awareness. They kind of know that there are stuff out there, but they haven't taken the time to look into it, which is really important for business owners to actually spend time researching better ways of doing things, not just in takeoff, but all aspects of their business. Any business owner should always be allocating a bit of time to be aware. And then of course there's the good old fear of change, isn't there? The reptilian brain kicking in and holding us back, protecting us from ourselves, really. Just carry on doing what you're doing. It's fine. It's
Personally, I mean, I agree. Like, I go to make a decision on something, and all of a sudden it's like this, like a fire hose of information, and it's like, oh my God, how do I make a decision? I feel like my head's gonna explode. So I mean, I get it, but they need trustworthy inputs, right? So where and how do they make decisions? Who do they lean into to make their decisions? Is it other builders, or do they look at social media? Do they look at trade publications? How are they making their decisions?
I use ChatGPT, to be honest. That's why I use that for a lot of stuff now. Like, what is the best, summarized based on price and reviews, and that kind of gives me a bit of a short list. And then I would go and actually do a little bit of physical research and watch a demo. But I think it's important to hear from other builders, but I think you've also got to be aware that other builders might have their own they're going to have their own biases, because they're not going to be across all the different options. They're going to be all across the obviously the solution that they're using. So you've got to keep that into context. It's a review based on their own experience of one thing. But I would definitely be using AI for research now. I use it for everything.
Yeah, I have no doubt. So Rich, you also had a technology aspect to your research. Where do you see builders are needing it most? And then where do you see they lean to get trustworthy advice?
Well, I think I think all of this, any kind of, and you can broaden the term innovation, automation, efficiency. I mean, builders constantly tell us in our research that one of their goals for the next year, or their goals currently, is to be more operationally efficient. How they get there is the next question. And I think, there's obviously really good industry specific software programs out there that can help you, whatever your pinch point is. I think that's the thing. I mean, a builder needs to first identify where his pinch points are, her pinch points are. And in Russ's research is showing that it's incrementally increasing, that they're looking at the cost to build, the narrow margins in terms of making mistakes on takeoffs and estimating and purchasing. So, and that's a great place to start. Just let's button that up. Let's make sure that it's accurate. Let's make sure that you're being as efficient as possible, and looking at all different sources and all different inputs to those costs, and finding ways to make it more efficient and accurate and more profitable. But I think that requires, and any kind of innovation requires, a mindset that you want to get better. And I don't, again, know that's a prominent mindset in this industry. I think that this industry falls back on habits. You hear all the time builders saying, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're going to do it. And to what degree they suffer for that determines whether they're going to change that mindset. So, I think that, builders who are aware of the pressures on them, and the potential impact, or the impact now on their profitability, will start to look at, getting off of a spreadsheet and going into some sort of program, and ideally something that's integrated, as you alluded to earlier, Jennifer, with their suppliers and their subs, and getting everybody on board so those inputs are really accurate and timely. So I think, the technologies that I see a little bit of movement on, and again, we've been talking to this for a generation, are production efficiencies. Ones that they can use to reduce the time and labor demand and materials through both better takeoffs and estimating and engineering, but also through just more efficiencies in terms of being able to build faster. And I think that I would hope, and I've been hoping for a long time, that builders will start to embrace some of those production efficiencies, whether it's pre-cut framing all the way through some sort of volumetric modular, to produce more homes that we need, to balance supply and demand so that we can get back to an economy that has and offers attainable housing. Obviously, that's a complex issue, but I think one of the big barriers is production inefficiency and production costs. And we're seeing that in different ways through our research. That's where most of the cost is. That's where, to me, most of the opportunity is, therefore. So, but again, it's a mindset. You have to have a mindset of willingness to change, and even more so, a willingness to continually get better. And both what Russ does and his group does, and what we try to do with our National Housing Quality Award program is champion that and help builders benchmark against those builders that are the best run builders in the country. And hopefully that creates some sort of if not a sea change, then at least an incremental change in builders' mindsets.
Yeah, this has been such a great conversation, and I want to encourage the audience, if you have any questions. I'm going to have a final question for both of you. It's around AI, which is such a huge topic. Russ, where is AI impacting custom home builders? You just talked about how you're using it for everything. Where is AI impacting custom home builders and remodelers the most, and what is your prediction for the future? How quickly is it evolving, and how can they benefit the most from it?
Well, what we're seeing in the data is that it's most widely used by builders in marketing. About 27% of builders at the back end of last year were using AI in their marketing, which, when you think, it's only been a couple of years, 2-3 years now, it's a phenomenal take up in the industry, which is great to see. Client communication as well, 18%, that was the next biggest. So they're the two areas, but like you say, it's going to hit all aspects of running a building company. Builders are using it to optimize their designs, because they can eliminate a lot more mistakes, especially when we're talking custom home building. You're creating something on site that has never been created before. This is where you've got to solve problems on site. It's invariably come up, but you can eliminate a lot of those challenges now with in the design stage. Project planning and management is another big one where builders are using it in estimating as well and takeoffs. But client communication, this is a big one, because builders are owners of their own companies. That makes this quite emotional. So when you spend 9 months dealing with a client, putting together a $1.5 million contract, and then they say, no, I've decided not to go ahead. Some builders can get quite frustrated and upset. And we had an example recently where a builder, he was just told no at the end after spending all this time putting this contract together. And he wanted to send the client a piece of his mind. He got quite angry, but just before he hit send, he held himself back. He had one of our coaches ringing in his ears about trying to show more restraint. So he didn't send the email. Instead, he put it into ChatGPT, explained the situation. ChatGPT came up with an email, which he then sent. So it was toned down. It was respectful, but it did articulate how he felt and the disappointment. The client ended up a week later responding. That led to a conversation, and 4 weeks later he did sign a contract at $1.5 million. So it saves us from ourselves in terms of communication, I think, because I think we've all sent an email at some point that we probably wish we didn't send in the heat of the moment, and it's given Rich has done it. So but also supply chain resource management. I think a glimpse of the future here. Just look what Amazon is doing. They supply almost everything, but they can't supply absolutely everything. There are still gaps. They're now using AI to plug those gaps. You know, if you order something or you want something that Amazon can't provide, they've now got an AI bot that will go and order it for you. I mean, there's two factors there. They obviously want to completely dominate the supply chain, even though they're not going to be initially making any money out of ordering from other companies. But the other part here is consumers have that much faith in AI now that they will just, you know, without any kind of research, you know, that you're just saying what they want and the AI will go and buy it. I mean, that is scary levels of trust, isn't it? That consumers are actually placing on AI, but energy efficiency as well, sustainability. But in terms of, I guess, predictions for the future, AI agents, like I mentioned earlier, that is the big one. And that potentially, and I think we've got to be realistic here, but if I look to the future, put the binoculars on, I see a world with 80% unemployment. And that's not necessarily going to be a bad thing, or maybe it could be a world where part-time employment is pretty much the norm. And yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing because I don't think unemployment is going to be looked on in the same way. There'll be 20% of people that want more out of life and are prepared to do what it takes and work all hours to get there. But they'll be creating companies where, you know, we're talking about billion-dollar companies being run by one person in the future. These companies will pay huge amounts of tax, which will then fund basically the lifestyle of the many. I think that's probably a world that we're going to be moving to long term. Not going to happen overnight, but overnight I think agents are coming for the VAs this year, and next year who knows where we end up. It's one of those things that very, very difficult to predict too far out because it is just changing so fast.
No doubt. Thank you, Russ. And Rich, same question to you. AI, how's it impacting the builders and remodelers the most, and what's your prediction for the future?
Well, I think Russ touched on it earlier in that, you know, in our research, relative few are actually using it. And if they are, they're using it for sales and marketing and to some degree kind of design and planning. I think those are the two, at least in the research we've done with the Home Innovation Research Labs and our own, and in other studies, is kind of bearing out. And really, we're talking about kind of a 20% of builders that respond to those surveys are saying that they are either using AI or, and far more, are researching it. And to Russ's point, that's kind of where this industry operates. I mean, they don't want to be first, and I think they're at least kind of trying to get educated about what it might do. And some are actually deploying it in those two areas. I think really what we're seeing is the impact, I think, is going to come from outside builders with AI being applied to programs that, and we already have seen this, programs that tremendously streamline the land prospecting and purchasing aspect, which can take 6 months normally. And there's a couple of AI-driven companies out there with using AI to really streamline that down to maybe a few hours, at least to give you all of the information that you would normally have to gather over the course of 3, 4, 5 months, gives it to you in minutes, literally, and you're able to make decisions and pull the trigger faster on the land deal, which is a really important thing in this industry right now, especially for builders who are operating in a very competitive market, especially with public builders. So I see that there's AI that came out that I had the fortune to kind of learn about it at IBS. That is looking at ways to using AI to simplify, kind of, I don't want to say dumb down, but basically kind of summarize municipal code language. So as you know, every municipality, or most municipalities and states even in this country, can adopt in full or amend at some level, or not adopt at all, the I codes, right? They don't have to do that. It's just a national code, and unless the state demands that they take it in full, a state or municipality can amend it and accept it in any way they want. So from county to county or municipality to municipality, the code may be different in terms of what it allows and what a builder can do. So this AI engine from this company called Forge in California in Oregon, is synthesizing all of that by municipality. So if I'm working in, Cobb County in Atlanta, or I'm working in Deschutes County in Oregon, I can get a summary of that building code. I can understand what's required. I don't have to wade through the legalese of a typical code book. And it basically gives me what I need to do, and understanding what, if I move to the next county, how that might change. So we're talking about real efficiencies, real world stuff where, it's not holding you back. You're not getting to a point, kind of to Russ's point earlier about, the custom builder who lost the contract after so many months of preparing a bid and going through the process. You go through the process of what you think is going to be a code approved plan. You get to the code approval and it's like, no, you missed that. This is wrong, whatever. It gets redlined. And then you're back in the back of the line for another 3 months to get your permit. So this will hopefully streamline that process. And that's real money. That's real time, land holding, cash flow, all of that stuff. So I see AI being used in ways that help builders do their jobs better, but doesn't require them to necessarily integrate it into their operations quite yet. And I think that's a good place for builders to be. Those that have the mindset, again, to improve and look to be more efficient, they'll find those solutions, they'll find those programs for them. And others will be more and more left behind if they're not looking to be operationally efficient, and looking for help for that.
Yeah, well said. So with Build Exact, we actually have a tool powered by AI that connects to the Home Depot and their price list and their specific pro extra account. So it can also, like the tool, you can just say, I need a R30 wall assembly, 40 linear feet, and it will build it for you, and you can save that as an assembly within Build Exact and then put it all the way through connecting to your extra account on Home Depot and the exact pricing with there. So it is certainly something that, people are using that and they're just in awe of how efficient it is and building into that efficiency that you were talking about for their business.
And I think AI, as a journalist, I am naturally cynical, so I kind of distrust something that searches the entire internet for something and comes back to me with an answer. But I think AI used in a way that, like I said, these code books are already there. The code language is at the code, the building department, office. Not even a physical book; it's a digital book. And so it's just drawing from that resource to then explain what each of those code requirements are. So it's a much more kind of reliable response using AI to get it. And so I like that application of the technology.
Yeah. Well, Rich and Russ, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your great studies and research and insights with us today and the audience. Really appreciate it and really love that everybody joined us today. We'll be putting this recording out on our website as well, so you can refer back to it as needed. But thank you so much, Russ and Rich, and thanks to the rest of you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Good to see you, Russ. Take care.
Good to see you, Rich.
Take care.